A frail old man tried to visit a museum, but when he entered, the museum staff looked him up and down with disdain and told him to leave. They told him this wasn't a place for charity cases and turned him away. But what they didn't know was that they were humiliating a living war hero. Just moments later, it became clear who he really was. When a decorated general stormed in and revealed a truth that left the entire room speechless. On a chilly Tuesday afternoon in downtown Stuttgart, the museum lobby bustled with school tours, tourists snapping photos, and sleek-suited professionals mingling under the soft hum of fluorescent lights. When a frail-looking old man with sunken cheeks, paper-thin skin, and a coat to sizes too big slowly shuffled toward the entrance, clutching a manila envelope in one hand and a faded blue cap in the other. His shoes were worn thin, laces frayed, and he walked with the kind of careful, deliberate steps that suggested both pain and pride, as though each step carried the weight of years no one else could see. And when he reached the ticket desk and softly asked, "One senior ticket, please," the young man behind the counter, barely in his 20s and wearing a smug grin, gave him a once-over, scoffed under his breath, and replied, "Sir, this is a private event. You need to register online." Then leaned over to whisper something to his colleague while chuckling, prompting the second staffer to peek at the old man and laugh too, shaking his head as if the sight of an elderly man in an old military jacket was somehow absurd, outdated, or offensive. A couple in line behind him began shifting impatiently, murmuring about the delay, while a security guard from across the hall started walking over, sunglasses perched on his head like a crown of authority, and asked in a stern voice, "Is there a problem here?" To which the young ticket agent said with a smirk, "No, just some old guy who thinks he's still in uniform," which made the guard step forward and place a hand on the old man's shoulder, telling him, "You'll have to leave, sir. This event is by invitation only." And the veteran, who hadn't even introduced himself yet, simply nodded, whispered, "I understand," and turned to walk away, his eyes glassy not from sadness, but from the bitter recognition that this wasn't the first time. The world had decided he was irrelevant. He had come here to donate something, a piece of history, something sacred that had been sitting in his drawer for 50 years. A map soaked in sweat and blood, with scribbled notes from a covert mission no one had ever documented publicly. A mission that saved hundreds of lives, but was classified beyond top secret. And all he wanted was to hand it over, quietly, no fanfare, just to ensure it ended up in the right hands, in the right museum, among the people who cared. But now he was being turned away like a beggar, laughed at like a fraud, and as he slowly made his way to the coat rack where he'd left his scarf, a child nearby pointed at him and said, "Mommy, why is that man so sad?" To which the mother quickly hushed the child while the staff continued chuckling, until suddenly the mood shifted. The double doors of the museum burst open with a gust of wind and a sharp clack of heels, and in marched a tall, broad-shouldered man in full military uniform, not just any officer, but a 4-star general with rows of medals glinting under the lobby lights. a presence so commanding that conversations froze mid-sentence, and the receptionist dropped his pen. The general scanned the room with laser focus, then spotted the old man just as he was about to leave, walked briskly over, and said in a voice that carried the weight of command, "Sir, you forgot this," holding out a folder that had slipped from the old man's coat earlier. But what happened next left everyone stunned. Instead of handing it over casually, the general snapped into a full salute, straight-backed, eyes forward, voice ringing out with pride. "It is an honor to stand in your presence, Commander Feldman." And the room fell into absolute silence as the general then turned to the stunned receptionist and said, "This man isn't just a guest. He's the reason this museum exists." Before motioning to the security guard, "Remove your hand from his shoulder. Now." And the guard, flustered, stepped back immediately, mumbling an apology. While the receptionist's face went pale as paper, the general turned back to the old man and said, "Sir, your seat is waiting. Please allow me to escort you," and offered his arm, which the old man hesitantly took, whispering, "You didn't have to do all this," to which the general replied, "After what you did for my father." "Yes, I did." And the entire room watched in stunned silence as the two men walked side by side through the hall, past all the onlookers who just moments ago had judged him, now too ashamed to meet his eyes, while whispers erupted across the lobby. "Commander? Did he say Commander? Wait, Feldman? The one from Operation Emberfall?" And as they passed a display titled Heroes of the Forgotten Front, a military historian who'd been setting up an exhibit froze, looked at the old man, then gasped and said, "Is that the Commander Feldman?" and nearly dropped his clipboard. The general smiled and nodded, "The one and only," and added, "He's here to make a donation. Something that will change the way we tell history." And when they reached the main auditorium, the lights dimmed, and the announcer who was just about to start the event adjusted the microphone and said, "Ladies and gentlemen, please rise and welcome a living legend," and the crowd of dignitaries, students, soldiers, and even the same rude staff from earlier stood up one by one. Applause slowly building, then roaring, as the general helped the old man to the front row, right next to the mayor, the governor, and the museum director, who all extended their hands in respect. Afterward, during the closing remarks, the museum director personally apologized on behalf of the staff, announced that a new exhibit would be named after Commander Feldman, and invited him to speak. And though his voice trembled at first, the commander finally told the story of that secret mission, not for praise, but to honor the men who didn't make it back. And when he finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. By the end of the day, the same receptionist who had mocked him earlier came up in tears, asked for forgiveness, and requested a photo with him. And the general, standing beside them, said to the crowd, "Let today be a lesson. Never judge a man by his clothes or his age, because some of the greatest warriors walk among us quietly." And as the sun set behind the glass-paneled museum, its orange rays falling on the polished floor, Commander Feldman stepped outside, his coat flapping gently in the wind, knowing that after years of silence, His story had finally been heard, and that respect, though delayed, had found its way home.